Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive.
Uh,
Today, we are going to take a closer look at the world of anti-money laundering,
okay. So,
AML,
uh,
as it's more commonly known. And we're going to be specifically looking at some of the big
uh,
AML penalties
okay.
that came out during 2024. So this is going to be relevant for anybody in finance, anybody who's following kind of the global financial system.
Absolutely.
So yeah, if you're interested in these sorts of topics, this deep dive is definitely for you.
Really fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
We're talking about real high stakes in the world of financial crime. So
Yeah.
it's a good one.
Exactly. And we've got a really interesting source today
Okay.
that we're going to be pulling from that basically breaks down some of the largest AML penalties of 2024. And I think the first one on the list is going to grab everyone's attention because we were talking about
Uh-huh.
TD Bank
Mm-hmm.
getting hit with a record $3.5 billion
Wow.
penalty,
That's huge.
which is just an absolutely
Yeah.
massive amount.
Yeah, that's not just a slap on the wrist. We're talking like a major earthquake in the world of AML enforcement.
Exactly. And it really does seem to signal a shift, doesn't it?
It really signals a shift in the whole regulatory landscape because you see multiple authorities involved. You've got the Department of Justice, you've got FinCEN, you've got the OCC, and they're all just coming down hard on TD Bank.
Right.
It really shows you how seriously they are
Yeah.
taking AML compliance these days.
And it's not even necessarily just about, catching criminals. It's about holding these institutions accountable for, unintentional lapses in their system.
Exactly. It's about accountability. It's about building robust systems. It's not just about, you know, good intentions anymore. You've got to have the infrastructure in place to prevent these things from happening.
Right. So let's actually dig into the specifics a bit here. What exactly did TD Bank do
Yeah.
that was so egregious that resulted in such a massive penalty? What were the details there?
So the details are actually pretty mind-blowing when you look at them. They failed to detect $670 million in illicit funds.
Oh, wow.
And on top of that, they missed literally thousands of suspicious activity reports. These are the SARs that we talk about. These are like the red flags.
Yeah, look, how do you miss that many red flags?
It's a great question, and it really speaks to a systemic failure within their AML program, and that's what the regulators are really focusing on. They're saying, okay, you can't just say, oh, we didn't know this was happening. You have to have the systems in place to detect these kinds of activities, and when you don't, you're going to face severe consequences.
Yeah, so it really does underscore just how important it is to have robust systems in place. I mean, we talk about this all the time, but it's like these cases really drive it home.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
They do. And the interesting thing is it's not just the massive institutions like TD Bank that are getting caught up in this.
Right.
We see further down the list, City National Bank got hit with a $65 million penalty.
Still significant.
Still significant, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was for weak risk management and non-compliance with AML rules.
Right.
So it's really across the board, you know?
Yeah, so it's interesting. You would think, oh, 65 million, that's nothing compared to 3.5 billion, but it's all relative, right?
It is. It is. And for an institution the size of City National Bank, that is a significant penalty.
Exactly.
And it really shows that AML compliance is not just about catching the big fish. It's about managing risk across the board.
Yeah.
From the moment a customer opens an account to monitoring their transactions for anything suspicious, every institution, regardless of size, needs a robust AML framework.
And speaking of different types of institutions, we've talked about banks, but this next case I think is particularly interesting. Sky City Adelaide, which is an Australian casino,
Interesting.
was fined 67 million Australian dollars.
Wow.
Which comes out to about 42 million US dollars. And this was for AML violations. So can you talk to us a little bit about why casinos in particular are such a absolute for money laundering?
Casinos are inherently high risk when it comes to money laundering because they handle these large cash transactions and they cater to these high roller customers.
Right.
So imagine you're a criminal and you've got $1 million in dirty money.
Yeah.
What do? You go to the casino, you buy a bunch of chips with your cash, you gamble a little bit, maybe lose a little bit.
Right.
Then you cash out the rest and you say, hey, these are my winnings. This is clean money.
Oh, I see.
It's a simplified example, but it shows you how casinos can be exploited by money launderers and why they need these really strong safeguards.
Yeah. So for Sky City in particular, what were some of the failings that they had that led to this penalty?
So they failed to properly vet 121 high-risk customers.
Wow.
And some of these customers were even flagged by law enforcement.
Oh, wow. So they were literally on like a watch list or something.
Potentially. Yeah, it's a major oversight. And it really highlights the importance of know your customer KYC procedures.
Mm-hmm.
Casinos need to go beyond these basic identity checks. They really need to understand the background and the source of funds for their high roller customers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Otherwise, they're leaving themselves wide open to abuse.
Well, it's interesting, too, because we've got, the banks, TD Bank, City National Bank,
Yeah.
and then the casino Sky City Adelaide. It really highlights the breadth of AML enforcement.
It does. And, it's not just limited to those sectors either.
Right.
Further down the list, we see Klarna Bank, which is a Swedish bank, and Starling Bank, which is a UK fintech company, also facing penalties for AML violations.
Interesting.
So it really shows you that AML regulations have a global reach. And regulators are increasingly scrutinizing fintech companies and other financial players.
It really runs the gamut, doesn't it?
It does. It's no longer just a concern for traditional financial institutions.
Yeah.
Everybody's got to be on top of this.
Right. So for the average person listening to this, it might seem like these are just big fines for big companies, but what's the larger takeaway here for our listeners?
That's a great question, and I think the key takeaway is that these penalties signal a real shift in the regulatory landscape.
Okay.
AML compliance is no longer just a concern for banks. It's an issue for any business that handles financial transactions.
So essentially any business.
Pretty much, yeah. If you're dealing with money, you need to be aware of AML regulations, and you need to have systems in place to comply with them.
Wow. So it really does impact everyone in some way, shape, or form.
It does. In a way, we all have a role to play in preventing financial crime.
Right.
By understanding the risks and reporting anything suspicious, we can help strengthen the system as a whole.
Yeah, and that's a good point because, we all kind of play a role in this ecosystem, right? Yeah, so, after looking at all of these different cases and the trends that we're seeing, it really does make you wonder, do companies truly learn from these massive penalties? Or are they doomed to repeat the same mistakes?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
The cost of non-compliance is clearly high.
Yeah.
But is it enough to change behavior?
Right. And I guess only time will tell.
Exactly. We'll have to see how these institutions adapt their AML frameworks.
Yep.
And whether these penalties truly serve as a deterrent for future violations.
Definitely something to keep an eye on. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of AML penalties. I think this has been a really eye-opening conversation.
Absolutely.
And we hope this has given you a better understanding of the challenges and the stakes involved.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a great discussion.
Always a pleasure. Till next time.
All right, take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.